Welcome back to the Ryan Dustin podcast, Words from a Humble King. Today I want to kind of cover the topic of resentment. And it's a topic that honestly I never thought I'd be discussing. But you know how God can be, man. He can orchestrate some circumstances that can, resurface some hidden rooted issues of your heart. And resentment can hold you back, boy, I'm telling you, right? The best way I know how to describe resentment is like trying to accomplish a goal or your purpose with a blindfold on, causing a limited perspective based off hidden and buried emotional burdens that has shaped your characteristic traits, right? And now you've adopted those characteristic traits, and they're all stemming from past hurts and grievances and perceived injustices. While it all translates into strained relationships and huge impact on your mental health. I'll explain more about this in a moment, but the crazy part about it all is because you're looking at it from the inside out, from a subjective view, you feel justified in the shaping of your now distorted viewpoint based off real pain that you really did experience, right? And man, this topic is juicy, but we'll touch on these points, here in a few moments. But before we dive deeper, I want to be vulnerable enough to explain what initiated these thoughts in me. And it's just for clarity, based off me wanting to provide context and an understanding for the topic so that it is hopefully relatable and you can apply it to your own life a little better. Let's dig in. So I've been actually coaching my youngest son, Cameron's basketball team, since late December. Now I've coached Cameron's team, both his teams, the first 2 years in the 8 to 10 group. Now he's in a developmental league. He's in a developmental church league, actually. And this is actually his first year in the 11 to 13 age group, and he's undersized. Now, my thinking is approaching this year is that there's going to be heavier competition, tighter refereeing, which also means that there's going to be more expected for the group of boys that I'm going to receive, that I'm going to have a hand in coaching. And keep in mind, this is also that age group where kids are beginning to form their own understanding, right, from their own subjective circumstances, from their own subjective surroundings, right, from their own world. Now, I look at coaching as a mentor, right? I mentor here, meaning I take it serious, right? And I take it seriously because I get a hand in molding mindsets as the kids approach fast and quick thinking and decision making underneath a new level of pressure that these children are going to experience. Pressure from the defenders and in the audience, referees, the pressure to perform and to achieve a goal, win the game, and prove to themselves that they have what it takes to triumph, right? And the game speeds up on them on this level. Older kids means faster kids. It means more competitive kids. It means more goal-oriented kids, especially when you're talking about sports. And honestly, I truly believe it resembles the challenges of life to a degree, which is also why I take it so serious. Teaching these kids the principles of quality decision making underneath this kind of pressure, I feel, is only preparing them to live in the levels of life that they're living in right now, especially for this age group. I mean, think about it. These kids, when you think about 6th grade, they're getting a chance to just get into middle school and are being exposed to so much more, both good and bad, for the first time in their lives, which can be traumatic to a young mind. Think about it. Racism, inequality, peer pressure, uncertainty, the change in their own bodies, drugs, sex, right? Puberty, status, at-home troubles, and bigger school workload. The merging of conflicted belief systems for the first time, and so much more. I can go on and on, right? But these kids, they're going through a lot mentally as they, as they're thrown into this bigger pool of kids for the very first time in their lives, which is why I'm kind of taking it so serious. And then there's the seventh graders that finally are getting acclimated, but they're still managing the stages we just talked about, but still experiencing the feeling of not necessarily being all the way there yet. You know, that weird level of incomplete development, learning that they're now examples for the sixth graders while still trailing the coattails of all of the eighth graders that are in middle school. And then there's the eighth graders, and they're preparing to approach a new level, one where they're going to experience in high school, which is going to be the cycle of it all replayed all over again, right? This is a cycle they thought they just figured out. And for them, there's moments of feeling like, you know, you're on top of the world, but also feeling like there's so much uncertainty, you know, approaching you quickly on the next level. You know what I mean? The feeling of having it all figured out, but also in the middle of not having it all figured out as well. Man, this is tough for a 13-year-old mind. This is the feeling of big and small, living and coexisting in a mind where it's changing constantly, but also developing constantly. And you all remember that emotional roller coaster that none of us could properly communicate to our parents or to our guidance counselor. This is what I get a chance to have a hand in molding. This is, again, why I take it so serious. Now, we're undefeated on the season, and I'm not saying that to brag. Honestly, I am not saying that to brag, but I am saying it to provide context, because the perception is people want to beat us. Teams are showing up to play us like they're not showing up to play other teams. We're like, right? People love the underdog. The gym is against us when we show up. The other team scores, the gym roars, right? And teams are starting to consider us to be a common enemy. And the refs begin to form a bias due to the nature of the developmental concept of the league. And I understand this truth, but I don't agree with it. That's the problem here. We do look like an overwhelmingly dominant team, not because of skill set. We're not a better team because of skill, but I approach coaching like mentorship. I teach the kids how to play, how to be disciplined underneath pressure, how to make decisions underneath pressure, right? And that actually translates into life. The pressures of life, but also the pressures of the game. I teach the kids how to think underneath that kind of pressure. This is the ingredient that helps us and our team, it helps our team have a competitive edge every single week. We help the kids think about how to approach their weaknesses. We want them to be in orchestrated, challenging moments. We want them to be in challenging moments because it provides insights on the adjustments that need to be made in their thinking. It has to be, their thinking has to change in their most pressured moments. While other teams, they look for easygoing environments free from stress, which is an unrealistic reality for the game of basketball, let alone life. We encourage the failures of our team. Each individual team, we are actively looking for their failures so that we can locate their weaknesses, so that we can mentor them on how to confront what they would rather avoid about themselves, right? And any other way doesn't help them to develop. And other teams would rather nurture their strengths and avoid the molding of resilience and a solid mindset. Other coaches, they follow instructions from a template that this league provides. And the template, it can't relate to the levels of life that these kids are actually in. But me, on the other hand, I'm following my heart on this one. Not to say that I'm not using the template, but I use the template to translate the template into or to resemble life. Something these kids can actually relate to and actually respond to. All year, we've been dealing with these referees, coaching the opposing teams in the middle of games, while choosing to be a bit more strenuous on our team because of the perception of talent rather than the style and coaching on either side. Refs blatantly choosing to call violations on us that they are clearly letting go of on the opposing side, while oddly enough explaining it away and feeling justified in their explanation to everyone as to why they are literally choosing a side. And to everyone on the surface, because of the perception of the skill set, not the coaching, which it should be, it seems reasonable to them as to what the refs are doing. Do you know how this looks to our kids? And I say again, the teams really are even, but the coaching is not. The refs are distorting the rules of basketball to quote unquote serve a need of coaching for the opposing teams while calling it evening the playing field. And this has been going on for weeks. You don't realize the messaging this sends to our kids that thought that rules were rules and that laws were laws and that a standard really was a standard and that they really are doing something right by overcoming their fears and facing themselves. Our kids, they're reconsidering the need for the rules of basketball in this league at all. The refs are refusing to see our truth while embracing another. And to us, our truth is valid. And no matter what the league says, no matter what pastors or referees or parents or other coaches may say, this game was close. And I had enough. I spoke up. I began calling out every call that they chose to overlook. And the refs, I'm sure, they didn't like it. The referees, as I've already articulated, is choosing to see a truth, but not the truth. And the referees, they felt disrespected, I'm sure, because I didn't view their truth as the truth. So I got a tech and I still voiced my opinion. The referee tried to tell me, sit down, shut up. You got to shut up because you got a tech, which infuriated me more. And then the referee said, and I quote, if you hit me, I'll own you. And this is in the middle of my frustration. This represented an unfair bias, but also an attempt to oppress and punish our team for coaching and mentoring the correct way. I felt a sense of hopelessness hit me, and I felt a rage that represented yet another authority and system only willing to see one thing, one truth, and not the full scope of things. And I firmly believed in it. I firmly believed in what I saw. And our group of kids, they are overcoming their weaknesses and learning how to make decisions underneath pressure. How can they be punished for that? The rules of basketball should not be manipulated, on the fly, based off of feeling and misunderstanding and human interpretation, because of the lack of development on one side of the basketball court. I just don't believe that. That type of thing should be adjusted in the off season. Make it a rule, a law, a standard, so that everyone can follow it and it doesn't seem lopsided. And to be honest with you, full humility and full accountability, I reacted instead of responding. I reacted to the racist comments instead of responding. I didn't use words to communicate. I used rage. Resentment had resurfaced. I was angry. And to be honest with you, through the mentorship and the coaching that we give our kids, I teach them how to respond to the pressure, not to react to it. And for that, I have to explain to them fully how it all progressed, what it really was, how it really unfolded. And I also have to apologize. I gotta be honest. In reflection and through the trigger that God used for this circumstance to reveal a deeply buried resentment and an emotional burden that was buried deep within the pits of my heart. And as I talked about a little earlier in our conversation, I can see how this resentment can limit me in my future. And I can see how these emotions can weigh you down, leading to overreactions in unconnected circumstances. I can see how God removed the hedge around me to allow extreme agitation to resurface, these issues in my heart. Of course, you understand these things cognitively, but to experience is a different ballgame. Resentment can cause stagnation, and it can make you look like a bad guy as you dwell on the past, preventing you from taking proactive steps to make changes due to the justification of your own, let's be honest, injustices. It can strain and even prevent God-sent relationships because of the presumptuous thinking based on past hurts and past lingering pains that we won't let go of, thus hindering us in our ability to communicate effectively, collaborate with others, and even nurture new and healthy relationships. It limits our perspective of people, and it contaminates our judgments and our perspectives. And it prevents us from seeing situations clearly, limiting our problem-solving ability. There's a way to properly communicate the things I saw about this basketball season, but my reactions resulted in bleeding on the point I had been trying to beat into others who couldn't see what I saw. Essentially, I got mad because others honestly couldn't bring what I brought to the table, which are the gifts based off of my past experiences. And lastly, but also more importantly, because of how God worked this thing, I had a chance to experience how it impacts you mentally. The stress and anxiety and the weight of the anger and the feeling of being misunderstood can make you snap. I almost quit on my kids this year because of how I disagreed with this league. I considered mentorship to be a gift, but my resentment almost turned it into a heavy chore, an undesirable task, a frustrating thing I didn't want to do anymore. Resentment had almost made me say no to my God-given gifts and God's blessings. I really do hope this helps someone. And be mindful of how your past pains can shape your now, which will impact your futures. This is the Ryan Dunstan Podcast. Words from a Humble King. Peace, family.